Okay, so right, I've now decided to make a Spitfire from 3D Labs. So I decided to start printing that for a winter project. Um, in case you don't know about 3D Labs, you can basically go and search for them. They do some really good STL files at reasonable prices. Um, Obviously, you can use Thingiverse for certain things, but when you really want good quality stuff, um, I'd highly recommend these guys. They've been doing it for a few years now, and I've bought a few planes off them. They're getting a bit pricey on some of them, I guess due to popularity, but around $20 isn't too bad for some of these. So I have picked up, let's have a look, I've gone for, I think it's a Spitfire. Which Spitfire is it I've gone for? I think it's this one. Yeah, the Mark, what's that, Mark 1516, is it? 10V, yeah, 16. I've gone for this one, and it is really quick as well. Um, you can even make a smaller version of these, I reckon, and put a smaller motor in it, just scale it down a bit. Although trying to do that is a bit tricky. There is a flight video up here. I think recording at over 200 kilometers per hour, given the motor setup. So it's a pretty fast plane, but it is beautiful. Yeah, um, that is a really high quality clear print. So I'm just starting to print mine, and hopefully I can get it to look equally as good as this one. I'm just doing the ailerons, the tail section, the fins, just getting my printer dialed in um, before I move on to the major components. So, because you have to sort of practice the thin wall printing. There you go, 231 kilometers per hour. So it's pretty fast. So that's currently busy printing. And in fact, if I just bring up the OctoWeb cam, yeah, it's currently printing the tips for the elevator tips. So that's coming along nicely. And I'm using about 200 on the head, 70 on the bed. I went through the INI files because they do provide the INI files, although because my printer's pretty much dialed in, I'm not importing them because they're old anyway, but they do give you some insights into the setup. So you don't always have to import these, but what you can do is you can come into the slicer settings, Cura, and then you can have a look inside them. So for the elevator and aileron, for example, you can just open these and then have a look. So you know your layer height's about 0.25, your wall thickness 0.4, retraction, yes, true, blah, blah, blah. Temperature of the head, print speed 60, bed temperature 70. That was interesting. So that just means that it gets better stiction, I suppose. Um, and I had a look through some of these settings. Filament throw 102%. But there are some good ones to look through here, and then mirror those in Cura. So that's what I've done. I've basically mirrored them. The first thing I've done, which the Prusa slicer has, which I quite like, is the initial layer height. And if you set that to 0.35 and you set the initial layer width to 120%, then that will give you a nice sticky, thick layer, but not too thick that you can't peel it off afterwards when you add your brim. And that will stop warping, pretty much nails it, because initially when I started printing these thin wall sections of 1 wall thick, it starts curling up at the edges, especially with the bigger pieces that are stretched diagonally across your bed, because it's going to be cooler on the outside than it is in the core. So, and it's just the nature of print beds. So you can never get them fully, 70 or 60 right on the edges, there always tends to be some differences, and that leads to warping on the edges where they're out here somewhere, in the if I could just get this a bit bigger, out on the edges, because one piece I'm printing is literally taking up a large section of this print bed. This is just a small tail section. The thing I like about Cura is the X-ray mode. It offers you that, and you can right click here. You've got mesh tools. You can choose to check the mesh to see if it's okay. It said it may not print properly. I can then come down here and analyze the mesh. Yeah. And if I want, I think there's a repair option here, is there? From Netfab, rename, check mesh, analyze, fix simple holes, fix model normals, split model into parts. So you could fix simple holes, and that will, go and do that. So this mesh needs more extensive repair to become watertight. Yeah, but I wouldn't worry too much about this, because 3D Labs, because the nature of their prints, let's slice this and I'll show you what I mean. And I have discussed this at length before. That's why they're always big on pushing Simplify 3D. But you don't you don't need it. It works perfectly well in Cura. I've printed lots of models from 3D Labs in Cura. Doesn't work in Prusa Slicer predominantly because these bits, the spars so to speak, are not meshed with the walls, and therefore they're seen as not part of a single model, and that's why it complains so much about getting these printed. But it's not too much of a problem. In other words, there are gaps between the rib and the wall, tiny, but because the material tends to blend in, it will typically weld itself up against the side wall. So it's not too much of a problem. The main problem I had in the initial 3D Labs is that, yes, there visibly were holes in the side walls, and but they don't have that problem now. They seem to print out quite well. They also recommend you turn the fan off, but my experience so far is it's better to leave the fan on. You can try it with the fan off and see how you get on with it. I might try it on the wings just to see how I get on with it. I tend to find the prints a bit cleaner, less blobby with the fan on than the fan off. So there's two fans, of course, one for the head and then there's one for the tip. And that's usually when you switch the fan on, you're switching the one that's cooling the tip always on. So anyway, that slice, the reason this is dark is because we are down to 0.25. As you raise this up, so I don't know, 0.35, effectively the same as the initial layer, you will see that will change the color accordingly. So just see, go and slice this. There you go. Yeah, it does this occasionally. You have to toggle it off and toggle it back on again. And I will turn off the auto slice feature in a minute once that's finished slicing. Okay, so there you go, that's finished processing the layers. And so now I can see it's around here, but I can just wanted to show you the inside so you can see, rather than in dark blue, you can kind of see how the layers are made up. And if you zoomed right in, sometimes you can see small gaps, but it's pretty hard to see because they are pretty good these days. Yeah, so I'm going to toggle that back to 0.25. Come on, 0.25, and reslice that. Hope that'll work. Sometimes Cura needs a little bit of jostling. Yeah, try that again. There you go. Right. Right, so that's done. And I'm using all the usual temperatures. I've got some top layers going in here. I don't really need any bottom layers, so I'm going to set that to 0, come to think of it. But I do need some top layers. I was doing some tips, that's why I had the top layers. And I was doing some ailerons and the like. Your slicing tolerance must be set to exclusive. Your brim, it's up to you how thick. I've set mine to 5, so I have a nice thick brim to stop the warping. And as previously mentioned, I've set the first layer height to 120% and 0.35 for the initial layer. Now it creates a nice, thick, sticky layer. And I think you can also play with the speed to do with the initial layer. And I think if you type in initial, I think I did set that to a slightly, so here we are. You set your initial layer speed to 20 millimeters per second. Yeah, skirt brim. And that, because that slows it down a little bit, you get a nice, slowly applied, thick layer. And you can glean these settings either by looking at the INI file, but mostly the Prusa slicer is very good in this respect, in that, and it's a shame that I can't print these parts in Prusa slicer, but it just won't handle it at all. It has these settings in there, so you can kind of plagiarize between the Prusa slicer and the Cura slicer. I'll try and open up, but I know for certain, pretty certain, but we'll give it a go. See if it'll accept this part, but most parts say that you split it into objects and it'll just fall to the bottom and then they don't align properly. So you kind of have to grin and bear it with a Prusa slicer. Let's have a look. So if I go to SD3 files and I went to the ailerons, etc., I think it is. Hang on a minute. Oh, I think I'm in the wrong directory. Yeah, not 3D files. Sorry, I want. Yeah, let's go. I think I was in the right folder. S3D, STL. That's what I want. And I want ailerons, etc. Do I want project files? Oh, I pressed the wrong key. Control I. I pressed Control O because that's what you do in Cura. For stabilizer left, which is the same part. Try and split it into objects, because usually that can get it to work. Already, look, it's saying, yeah, there are problems with the model settings because of this, them not being attached. But I don't think, if I just go for this one, this is going to work. We'll give it a shot, but I don't think it's going to work. So it's one wall thickness. I don't want a bottom layer. I do want a top layer, probably of 2. I don't need any infill. And yeah, it won't work. And that's because it'll just be hollow. Oh no, I did get it. That's interesting. Sometimes it works, but then it's all very stringy, look. Not sure that's going to work. And they're probably falling into the wrong place, I reckon. Anyway, it won't print because it's already started complaining about it. So I wouldn't be inclined to print this piece. And there I can see, look, there's some issues, you see. Yeah, so it's not going to print clean that. Yeah, you can see here it's not happy either. So whereas Acura, but anyway, coming back to the print settings and the filament settings, filament maybe under advanced, actually print settings, layer, skirt and brim, um, layer and perimeters. This is where you find this first layer look of 0.35, and yeah, you will find the settings in here anyway. Um, so that's how I've managed to glean information to get these the way that I want them. Because once you start doing thin wall printing, you will find it will warp on the corners. Typically, it will warp, especially on the bigger parts. So you're going to slice that one up and then have a good look at it. But they are brilliantly designed, these parts. They're really light, single wall, as I say, thin wall printing, and they've got lovely architecture inside. And they come out really strong as well with this kind of architecture. And so they really are, you know, aircraft grade in terms of lightness and strength. And providing your printer is dialed in correctly, it will vertically come up smooth without any problems. You should be able to get a nice vertical wall here without any blemishes. Never switch the fan off midstream, by the way, because you will find it will start oozing and it'll create a lump or a zaggy, as I call it, where it'll just change its texture. So always leave the fan on or off, one of the two, but never switch it off once it's started printing, because it will definitely change the material flow. The way that it lays out the material in alignment, it will definitely change things. So that's ready to print. And yeah, so good luck. So I'll let you know how I get on with this Spitfire. I'm really looking forward to getting this one in the air. I've still got a P51 to get in the air soon. It's pretty much finished. I had to build another thicker version of it because it wasn't really strong enough.